Tonight on News 5 Live, the House of Representatives approves extension to state of emergency at a special sitting of the House, but all gloves are off. The leader of the opposition proposes a 30-day extension as the debate heats up inside the House. The Prime Minister predicts a $400 million shortfall in recurrent revenue due to COVID-19. DHS Manzanero says only 2 weeks of swabs available because orders are being held up in the U.S. 2 weeks after a man is released from prison, he's gunned down a few yards from his home. Nigel Espat recovers from COVID-19. He's the sixth person to recover from the virus. And as wildfires rage on, the Forest Department joins forces with other agencies to battle the spread across the country. Details of these stories and more coming up in tonight's newscast.
SMART está totalmente preparado para las demandas del
Welcome to News 5 Live from Monday, April 27th. I am Marlene Cuellar. There was a special sitting of the House of Representatives this morning in Belmopan where only the bare minimum necessary to have a quorum was allowed to participate in the tabling of a motion to extend the state of emergency for an additional 60 days. A total of 7 elected officials, including Prime Minister Dean Barrow and 3 other government ministers, as well as opposition leader John Briceño and 2 members of the opposition attended the House meeting. While the galleries were devoid of party supporters, the media was also initially barred from attending the session, and we'll have more on that later. Inside, all gloves were off. Briceño proposed a 30-day extension to the state of emergency. Deputy Party Leader and Lake Independence Area Representative Cordell Hyde and Cayo South Area Representative Julius Espath both sounded off on why the People's United Party objected to the 2-month extension prior to a vote being taken. Here is the Prime Minister's immediate reaction upon exiting the meeting.
I didn't expect a straight ride because, as I indicated, after the National Oversight Committee had made its decision, I was called by the Leader of the Opposition a couple of days, I think a day or two certainly, after the meeting, and he did make clear that his party had in fact not supported the 60-day extension, and then they put out a press release. So I knew that it wouldn't be completely smooth sailing, but I didn't expect that the lengths to which 2 members resorted, I didn't expect that to happen. So I was a little bit dismayed.
Sir, we have now gone 14 days clear without a positive test. What indication does this have for you in terms of, as you all try to tweak the regulations which go into place on Friday?
It means that indeed we should be considering a degree of relaxation, and I've said in the scripted remarks that I gave, and of course today, that that's exactly what I contemplate happening. Remember, though, that I insist these decisions are not made by me alone, not even by the Cabinet. The Cabinet has, in effect, almost ceded jurisdiction as a de facto thing to the National Oversight Committee. So we will have a meeting of the National Oversight Committee on Wednesday, by which time the recommendations that come to the National Oversight Committee from the National Task Force. National Task Force, of course, includes all the CEOs, all sorts of persons from the private sector, especially medical personnel, and Dr. Marvin and his team. They will give us their recommendations so that we can consider them. The National Oversight Committee can consider them on Wednesday. But I fully expect that they understand from us that they are to examine actually what it is that we can do to relax. So they, that's their brief. And in consequence, I expect that it's just a matter of detail now as to exactly what measures that currently obtained will be lifted.
Lake Independence Area Rep Cordell Hyde was in favor of a 30-day extension. In speaking on the motion to extend the existing state of emergency for an additional 60 days, Hyde pointed to the massive economic impact that the countrywide shutdown has had on citizens, restricting movements and possibly citizens' rights. Hyde also said that reopening the economy should come with extensive testing to ensure that the Ministry of Health has a handle on the COVID-19 situation, despite businesses resuming daily operations.
When I heard on Wednesday that the motion would be presented here at the House for the state of emergency to be extended for 60 days, I immediately said, nah, we should do it for 30 days. And if needs come back, then we come back to the House after 30 days. For this reason, because I felt that the last few weeks have been rough on the Belizean people. And I felt almost instinctively that they would have cringed at the thought of 60 more days, like the previous few weeks. So if for only that reason, I felt like we should have in the first instance, say 30 days, and if needs be, we come back and extend it for however long we think it is required. And I still think that. But I also know that we have to be absolutely honest with the people of Belize, because we are not out of the woods yet. And I'm afraid that the last few days of this victory lap of no new cases, of this type of easing restrictions, have begun to give our people a false sense of security. I know that in the previous days, the previous weeks, I had begun to see a lot of people wearing masks outside. And over the weekend, I feel like that prevalence of masks has dissipated a bit. What we know for a fact, Madam Speaker, is that opening up of our economy or easing of restrictions has to be accompanied with robust testing. There has to be testing, so that the truest picture of what's out there is revealed to us.
The economic picture for Belize remains grim and dismal due to the new coronavirus crisis. Government's revenue is falling by almost $500 million as a result of the recent economic meltdown caused by the state of emergency imposed at the beginning of April. While several offices, including the Ministry of Natural Resources and General Sales Tax, have resumed operations, revenue has dropped to a trickle, while government's wage bill sits at $540 million. Will there be enough monies going forward to avoid reducing the salaries of public officers and teachers? According to PM Barrow, all efforts will be made to secure additional funds from the Central Bank of Belize to avoid having to cut the monthly income of those in the public sector.
We expect that there's going to be bigger than a $400 million shortfall in recurrent revenue. That's, as I said, almost half of the projections, and with GST having been shuttered, with the Ministry of Natural Resources having been shuttered, we did take the occasion of the amendment of SI 55 to take, because of the fact that the enhanced measures came to an end on their own expiration date on Saturday, those had to be taken out of SI 55, and we did ensure that we put natural resources on the list of government departments that can open now from, what is it, 9 to 4.
Sir, with the revenue shortfall, we know that the wage bill is $540 million. And with the shortfall that you're predicting of $400 million, you cannot make your payroll. How will the government continue to pay public officers? And is a payroll for public officers and teachers? And is a pay cut of some percentage in the foreseeable future?
Well, let me say that I will do my damnedest to refrain from any pay cut for public officers. How to do it? We will simply have to borrow more from the central bank. As I recollect, there is a degree of headroom there, and if we borrow all that we can borrow, we should be able to see the public servants through until there is a total reopening of the economy, which would then put us in a position to start to see the revenue inflows that would allow us to continue on from the point we reach when in other words, we should start to see some revenue enhancement before we reach the point where all the monies that I propose to borrow from the central bank would have run out. So in this way, I hope to keep public officers entirely without any kind of pay cut.
Opposition Leader John Briceño also sits on the National Oversight Committee as co-chair. While he has been abreast of government's need to reopen the economy as quickly as possible, the question of whether a 60-day extension is in itself excessive has also arisen. Aside from openly debating the need for a 2-month addition, Briceño also outlined necessary steps that should be taken by government to ensure that the war against COVID-19 is successful.